trade deficit does not necessarily mean that a country is ripping off. There are so many other aspects to trade that should be taken into account, and it's complex, it's nuanced.
Now, let's get the thoughts now of Monica Gorman, who's a former special assistant for manufacturing and industrial policy under Joe Biden's presidency. Now, at the global government relations firm Kroll Global Advisors. Monica, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about what is going on here, because it's really very much about the motivation and the thinking of one man. That's Donald Trump, and his conviction that a country selling more goods to America than it buys, it amounts to a rip-off. That view goes back decades. He's seen trade tariffs on imports as the answer since the 80s. But what do you say to Donald Trump's argument that whacking tariffs on trading partners around the world is going to make America stronger and Americans better off? What do you say to that?
Well, what I would say is that President Trump has tapped into sort of a deep unease in the United States. And I think that's why we saw him elected in 2016 and why we saw him elected again in 2024. And you think about the dislocation in certain manufacturing communities in the United States, factories shuttered, people out of work. It's really that desire that he is tapping into to make those factories great again. And the President Trump's approach is through tariffs, but he is tapping into an undercurrent of desire that I'd say is much, much broader. Now, it remains to be seen whether that tariffs policy is actually going to deliver the promise of more U.S. manufacturing, but certainly the desire is there across many swaths of the United States.
No, so I completely get and we have done for a long while, that in states of America, the Rust Belt states, there's resentment at seeing jobs, as it were, exported into countries where cheaper labor has been taken advantage of by companies. That is out there. That's been out there for a very long time. And Donald Trump has had that conviction for a very long time too. But your view as an economics and an industrial advisor, imagine you were in the White House and the president came up with this argument: let's whack up tariffs. It's going to make America stronger. It's going to make everyone better off. What would you be saying to that if he wanted your advice?
Well, I mean, speaking as a former policymaker, I know, and what I would say is that trade is so much more complicated than just tariffs and trade deficits. And take the country of Lesotho. I've spent time in Lesotho in my formal capacity in working in the apparel industry. There's a significant trade deficit between Lesotho and the United States. But it's not because Lesotho is ripping off the United States. Lesotho makes apparel. It's a very poor country, and they export apparel to us. They can't afford to buy many of the things that the United States makes. So I think it's a good example of a trade deficit does not necessarily mean that a country is ripping off. There are so many other aspects to trade that should be taken into account, and it's complex, it's nuanced. And so I think that would be my advice back, is to let's talk through those complexities, those nuances, the industries that are of particular concern to the United States, and focus there, as opposed to a broad blanket approach to tariffs.
Right. And look, so the president's argument, which he's articulated, I think more than once on coming back to the back of his jet Air Force One, is that by putting these tariffs on, he's going to raise billions or trillions of dollars in revenue income from these tariffs, and it's going to help to cut taxation. It's going to bring those jobs flooding back into America. That then has got to be weighed, hasn't it, against rising prices in America and just the disruption caused by this, against putting off foreign partners, as disrupting those trading relationships all over the world. That counts too on a balance sheet, not just in principle.
Yes, absolutely. Tariffs do raise revenue, but again, you have to look at what the impacts of those tariffs will be. I think history has shown us that tariffs have a very uneven impact. So just going back to the first Trump term with steel tariffs, we did see expansion of steel manufacturing in the United States. But then we saw declines in the downstream industries that utilized steel because there simply wasn't enough American steel. They couldn't expand fast enough to supply those other industries. So you saw demand increase, supply couldn't expand fast enough, and prices also went up for the domestically produced steel. So there's so many impacts to this, and not all industries will be affected evenly. All of that needs to be taken into account too when you're thinking about revenue.
Now, I'm just looking at a Truth Social post, another Truth Social post from the president, just literally in the last few minutes. He says at the foot of this post that negotiations with other countries which have requested meetings will begin taking place immediately. He was saying, or we were hearing over the weekend, that maybe 50 countries were lining up to start talks on some sort of deal. But the post also says the president announces that unless China withdraws its own 34% increase in tariffs, then he says the USA will impose additional tariffs on China of 50% effective April the 9th. That does point towards an all-out escalating trade war between two economic superpowers. And whatever else happens with these other countries seeking deals, maybe getting them, maybe not, that is a dark, dark prospect, isn't it?
Well, we certainly know the president at heart is a deal maker. And so I think we see countries lining up to have those discussions. But an escalating trade war is not going to serve anyone well. It will not serve the United States well. It will not serve our trading partners well at all. Yeah. So I certainly hope there will be an ability to bring temperatures down and start to have conversations, because in the end, everybody loses in an escalating trade war.
What about just going full on in a punch up with China in the way that may well be coming? Just that alone, what does that mean for the world economy?
Well, again, we think about China's role in the economy today, and there's many, many challenges in terms of China's industrial sector. China has invested heavily in its industrial sector for many years, in many ways creating an overcapacity and overproduction of key commodities and goods that has driven the cost down for everybody else in the world, and that is problematic. That is something that needs to be dealt with. However, you cannot reorder everything immediately overnight. There are many industries in which China dominates today, and you cannot change that overnight. And so I think as we look at some of the risks that have come with the way the world is today, we need to take that into account. Time is going to be a crucial factor in thinking about how these goals are achieved. And that is maybe something that we haven't heard discussed that much so far.
Right, and while time passes, while this uncertainty keeps going, then the prospects of ordinary Americans suffering through higher prices, for example, that just keeps on growing. It hangs in the air. So as someone who knows the political environment in America, how do you reckon we could see the political forces at play here start to make themselves felt? In Congress, there are some Republican senators and Congress members who are being more open about their worries about this. Then you've got corporate America. You're hearing more worries about that. Do you see any of it bearing on the president's mind, maybe even making him back down or retreat? Is that a possibility from what you know of Donald Trump?
Well, every White House is different, but certainly speaking as somebody who worked in the White House, who worked in an administration, we paid very close attention to what the business community was saying, what we were hearing from Capitol Hill, and then also what we were seeing from American consumers, both through data as well as just through anecdotes that made their way to us. So certainly I would expect that they are watching all of that. If we think about the business community in particular, one of the things that has struck me here is that there has not been a process really for the business community to make its voices heard.
No.
And even though manufacturing and supply chains are run by the business community, and because the president has imposed these tariffs using the International Economic Powers Act, IEPA, as opposed to one of the statutory authorities in the United States, say Section 232 or 301, there has not been a process for business to say, this is going to work or not. This will help us bring back manufacturing or not. And so I do think you are going to see more and more voices from the business community speaking up, because it's a stated goal that business will do something, but business to date has not really been a strong voice in the discussion so far.
Yeah, well, and you have to wonder whether Donald Trump will listen, how strong those voices will get. One voice, which now seems to be being raised pretty clearly, is that of Elon Musk. He's been posting on his own social media platform, X, declaring his support for tariff-free trade between the US and Europe. Free trade. He's put a clip up of the free trade economist, Milton Friedman. So there's a certain tension there. And Elon Musk, well, has been a pretty influential figure, hasn't he?
He certainly has when it comes to government efficiency, but I mean, Elon Musk is a special government employee. He does not have a formal role in the cabinet in policymaking, so I think there's really a lot of questions in terms of where his influence starts and stops. And I wouldn't want to speculate what it means for tariff policy again, because his role is so unusual, really unprecedented as compared to other administrations.
Oh, well, it's good to talk to you. We are all watching closely. Good to get your opinion. Monica Gorman, thank you.